The gavel came down on the wood, and in that one resounding knock, Kody Brown's world collapsed. Cameras flashed. There were whispers, and the man who once strutted as the self-righteous head of Sister Wives now found himself handcuffed, his eyes scanning a courtroom full of betrayal, sorrow, and righteous anger. This was not just another news headline. It was the culmination of years of secrets and tension, an empire built on domination that finally came crumbling down. The wives who had stood by his side were now standing against him, accusing him. The woman he had tried to keep secret, the enigmatic fifth wife, was now about to reveal the truth. And the man who had thought he was above the law had finally been brought to his knees. The Brown family's cracks had been evident to the viewers for years. But behind the cameras, things were much more sinister. Christine, Meri, and Janelle had long suspected something was amiss. They saw Kody leaving the house late, his mysterious trips, and money going missing without anyone knowing where it went. Initially, they tried to make themselves believe it was nothing, that perhaps Kody was stressed, or possibly in financial mismanagement. But suspicion became reality on the day Christine discovered the documents. Sheepish collections of bank withdrawals, clandestine accounts, and mysterious transfers had told a tale worse than she could have conceived. She gazed at the documents with shaking hands, the burden of deceit weighing heavily upon her breast. "He's been lying," she muttered to herself, a sob in her voice. When she presented the documents to Janelle, the family's smartest number cruncher, it all fell into place. Kody wasn't simply careless. He was intentional. He was siphoning cash into a life he was keeping hidden, a life that included another woman. The wives convened, Christine thumping the documents onto the table. "This is the evidence," she said. "He's broken our trust." Janelle nodded solemnly. "He thought we wouldn't catch on. But he's been sucking it out of us." And Meri, tears shining in her eyes, breathed the words no one wanted to hear. "After all that we gave him." This is what it boils down to. The betrayal was not personal. It was financial, emotional, spiritual. Kody secretly married a fifth wife, in secret, and kept her on money tapped from the family. For Christine, Janelle, and Meri, it was not merely a question of violated trust. It was survival. Their futures, their children, their houses, everything hung in the balance of his irresponsible decisions. And thus the unthinkable occurred. The wives who once stood united behind Kody now united against him. Enemies became sisters in arms. Rivals became allies. Together they brought the lawsuit that would bring him to light. The trial had been a circus from day one. Paparazzi swarmed the courthouse steps. Reporters thrust microphones in people's faces, and fans converged, some to cheer on the wives, others to shout insults at Kody. In the courtroom, the air was charged with tension. Kody entered, handcuffed, his haughty stride reduced. He attempted to stand tall, but the beads of sweat on his forehead gave away his fear. Opposite the aisle, his wives sat together for the first time in decades. Not as co-wives but as women united in purpose to take him down. The prosecutor didn't waste any time. In his booming voice, he stated the charges against Winglass: fraud, deception, financial exploitation, and breach of trust. "Not only is this a man who betrayed his family," he asserted, "but it is a man who manipulated, deceived, and ruined the very people he professed to love." Christine went up first. She was trembling, but her words were like knives. "We trusted him. With our kids, with our houses, with our futures." But each of his words was a lie. He thought we'd never know. But we did. And here we are to ensure that he pays for what he has done. Then there was Janelle, equipped with figures, dates, and invoices. She spoke with the venom of a razor, dissecting Kody's lie factory piece by piece. "This isn't about carelessness," she said. "This was a deliberate attempt to bleed us dry, to leave us helpless, while he constructed a new life in secret." Lastly, Meri approached the stand. Her voice broke, but the raw emotion in her words were enough to shut down the room. "For years I remained. For years I listened to him when he told me we were a family. But the whole time he was already preparing to leave us behind." Kody sat at the defense table, his head in his hands, shaking his head, mumbling under his breath. his face flushed with anger and humiliation. But the stack of evidence grew deeper with each hour, burying him under his own deceptions. And then the day turned around. The fifth wife took the stand. The doors creaked open, and in walked a woman, head down, white face, shaking hands. When she finally looked up, the room broke into illusions. She was not rumor. She was real, with tears running down her face. She told the truth. He promised me everything. He said I would be his future, that I would be protected, that I was the one he loved. And all I received was fear. He made me hide. He made me lie. And I understood. I was just another pawn in his game. The courtroom gasped. Even the wives who had prepared themselves for this had their hearts shatter anew. They did not stare at her with fury. They saw another victim, caught in Kody's never-ending cycle of manipulation. Robyn, sitting quietly at the back, appeared pale and broken. She had stood up for Kody until the end, but now even she could no longer deny the reality. The judge hunched forward, his brow serious, his tone severe. "Mr. Brown, this court has heard enough." The verdict came quickly. Guilty, fraud, deception, manipulation. The gavel came down again, and with it the empire of Kody Brown began to end. Christine wept out loud, clutching Janelle's hand. Meri, drained but relieved, breathed softly. "It's over." The bailiffs advanced, chaining Kody more tightly, dragging him off as cameras snapped a frantic pace. He glanced back once, his face ablaze with anger, remorse, and maybe fear. The man who had ruled a family of wives and kids now disappeared into a life that would be marked by bars and betrayal. The wives did not rejoice. There was no cheering, no clapping. Instead, they sat in a silence, the intensity of years of suffering bearing down upon them. This was not a triumph. This was survival. Outside the courthouse doors, reporters converged, headlines screamed, and fans argued. Some had seen justice, others tragedy. But one reality was unshakable. The sister wives' empire had fallen, and the women who once resided in its shadow now stood free. Kody Brown's arrest was more than a courtroom shocker. It was the last book in a chronicle of betrayal, domination, and ruin. His hubris, his secrets, his lust for power, all of it had crashed in the world's face. And ultimately, it wasn't only the wives that destroyed him. It was the truth. The truth that cannot be buried indefinitely. The truth that always ends up coming to light. The sister wives had been victims. They had been silent. They had been broken. But now, bound together by betrayal, they had become something else altogether. Survivors. Fighters, women who would no longer exist in the shadows of Kody Brown's manipulation. The gavel's sound had not even fallen, and already the courtroom was electric with an emotion that weighed the air. The back rows were filled with reporters, notebooks open, cameras snapping with demanding excitement. The fans of Sister Wives, who had watched the Browns for over a decade, filled the gallery, their murmurs blending together like a low, ominous hum. Everybody knew, this wasn't another hearing. It was the day the mighty had fallen, and then it happened. The double doors at the rear creaked wide, and all the necks in the room swiveled. The bailiff went through first, his face expressionless and professional, but behind him shuffled Kody Brown, a former chest-puffing, self-assured leader of a sprawling plural marriage dynasty, now a shadow of his former self, wrists fettered by steel handcuffs clanking with each reluctant step. Gasps circulated throughout the courtroom in waves. Air was being pulled from the room, as reality was brought down upon all those who watched the man they had watched smile on TV, speaking of family togetherness, and God's purpose, now stood before them as a defendant in shackles. Kody's face was flushed, his hair, which was always a source of pride, always perfectly coiffed, hung loose and disheveled, as if even it had given up to the mayhem of his crumbling world. His eyes scanned wildly about the room, seeking sympathy, loyalty, something that would recall the dominance he had once known. But what he saw made his stomach turn to stone. Christine sat in the front row, chin raised high, jaw clenched with years of bottled fury. Janelle sat to her right, papers carefully folded on her lap, her eyes hard and unflinching like a knife blade. And Meri, her face the most difficult to decipher, squirmed self-consciously in her seat, tears welling up ready to spill, but quickly replaced with a cold hard glare. that said louder than words. Enough was enough. Robyn was there too, farther back, white and shaking. Her eyes were the only ones that flicked in Kody's direction with anything like hope. Hope that perhaps this was all a dream, that perhaps he could still talk his way out of it. But even she seemed shattered, fragile, as if she knew that the illusion had already been broken. The crowd, strangers, journalists, fans leaned in, eager for every word. The downfall of Kody Brown was not just personal, it was national drama. The bailiff led him to the defense table, the jingle of his cuffs louder than any words. Kody attempted to stand tall, to appear as the man who once ruled over a harem of 4 wives and 18 children. But no posturing could disguise the truth. He was in jail, and his wives, those who had constructed his empire, were the ones who destroyed it. Christine's gaze did not falter. She watched each step he took with eyes that burned like fire. To her, this was not merely a trial. This was overdue justice. She recalled the years of manipulation, the broken promises, the sleepless nights consumed by questions of why she was never enough. And now, at last, she knew, because Kody had never been content with enough. Janelle held the papers in her lap closer. She wasn't there to seek revenge. She was there for facts. Numbers don't lie, and she had the numbers. The money that went missing, the covert accounts, the clandestine transfers, all routes led back to Kody's irresponsible choices. In her mind, she relived the moment when she discovered the truth, the nauseating turn in her stomach, when the figures didn't add up. She was here not as a scorned wife, but as a woman who refused to be financially destroyed by the man who had promised stability. Meri's emotions were more complicated. She had been there the longest, had endured the earliest years of their strange family experiment. For decades she had bent and broken herself to fit into the mold of Kody's vision. She had endured loneliness, humiliation, and the burden of being the first wife, a designation that had earned her few smiles. And now, seeing him step by in shackles, she felt something she hadn't known for years. Clarity. This was not merely a matter of betrayal. This was a matter of freedom. The judge came in, and the courtroom stood up. Even then, Kody glanced around, as if he was looking for supporters. But there was only silence to be found. The wives didn't stir, didn't flutter their eyelids, didn't give a hint of solace. His kingdom had betrayed him, and the truth was seared into every crease of his face. The judge's voice thundered out. "This court is now in session. Defendant, please be seated." Kody sank into the chair, his cuffs ringing against the wood. For the first time in his life, he was not the object of adoration, the voice of command, or the head of a family. He was merely a man, small, desperate, and trapped. The prosecutor stood tall, his commanding presence, his firm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have before you is not just a man who let down his family. This is a man who violated trust, who betrayed loyalty, and who believed he could use the lives of those nearest to him for his own gain without ever facing accountability. But today we hold him accountable." The gallery hummed. Some nodded, some gasped. Kody sat stone still, trying to suppress the twitch in his jaw, the tremble in his hand. He longed to protest, to yell, to remind all of them of the man they believed they knew. But his voice had been taken from him, silenced by the cold, hard fact of the evidence piled against him. Christine's memories churned in her head. She remembered the first moments when she had sensed something was amiss. The midnight calls, the impromptu excursions with vague reasoning, the change in his gaze when she posed basic questions. She had lent him years of her life, brought children up under his roof, believed him when the world deemed their existence odd. And this was the return. Deception, treachery, and another woman lurking behind the scene. Janelle's mind kept reliving the instant she'd laid eyes on the bank statements. She'd had her stomach turn, her throat constrict. The figures lied not. It was no accident, no mistake. It was intentional. Kody had taken a different road, a different existence, leaving his children and wives exposed. And that's why she sat here today, papers clutched in her hand, prepared to make his collapse more than emotional. It was legal, tangible, unshakable. Meri, quieter, recalled the shame. The way Kody had brushed her off, spoken to her as if she were a ghost. She recalled the solitude, the vacant rooms, the sensation of being erased in plain sight. Now, seeing him in handcuffs, she felt a bittersweet mix of sadness and vindication. This wasn't how she envisioned closure, but it was closure nonetheless. And yet, the greatest surprise of all was still to come. The rumors of a hidden fifth wife circulated through every corner of the courtroom, a ghost waiting to be unveiled. The public, the media, even the wives themselves understood that this hearing was merely the tip of the iceberg. But in that instant, as Kody sat beneath the unforgiving lights, surrounded by guards, shamed before the world, it was certain the narrative of the Brown family had changed forever. It was no longer a tale of polygamy, love, and faith. It was one of betrayal, deception, and the fall of an empire founded upon unstable ground. Kody had entered the courtroom a man in denial. But as the gravity of his arrest became clear, as the crush of the stairs weighed him down, one thing became inescapable. The wives weren't his anymore. The family wasn't his anymore. And for the first time in his life, Kody Brown was alone. The courtroom had already been rocked by the sight of Kody Brown in shackles. But the true earthquake was yet to come. The arrest was mere surface. The fissures in his kingdom went much deeper. And as Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood ready to reveal the truth, the world found out just how meticulously Kody had constructed his house of deceit, and how heedlessly he had let it go up in flames. For years, the sister wives' household had been a tenuous balancing act. Each wife had her house, her kids, her feelings, all while circumscribing her life around the gravitational force of Kody. From the outside, it appeared peculiar but workable. One man, 4 wives, numerous kids, and a vision of religious harmony. But in the confines of their home, murmurs of dissatisfaction had grown more vociferous. And it was Christine who first discovered the thread that unraveled the whole web. It started out like a normal day. Bills to sort, groceries to pay, kids to be attended to. Christine was not new to dealing with chaos. But when she went through the pile of documents one night, she noticed something that didn't ring a bell. A huge bank withdrawal for which there was no explanation. At first she assumed it was an error. Perhaps an automatic payment, or a records error. But then another withdrawal. And then another. Tens of thousands of dollars were vanishing from the family accounts, inexplicably, without a word. Her hands shook as she clutched the papers. Her thoughts whirling. Kody had always been evasive when it came to money, always making sure he took care of the finances. But this wasn't evasion. This was betrayal in black letters and figures. She could feel the burn of tears rising as she muttered to herself, "No, no, it can't be." But the reality was unavoidable. That evening, Christine lay awake, the papers scattered on her kitchen table, like fragments of a puzzle she did not want to complete. Every receipt, every transfer, every withdrawal was shouting one thing: Kody was sending money elsewhere, to another person. Christine knew that she couldn't handle this burden by herself. The following morning, she phoned Janelle. If anyone was going to be able to decipher the numbers, it would be her. Janelle was practical, level-headed, and always the one wife who could confront Kody with his money decisions based on fact rather than feeling. When Janelle arrived, Christine pushed the papers across the table, her eyes still red from lack of sleep. "Look at this. Tell me I'm wrong, please." Janelle adjusted her glasses, her eyes narrowing as she examined the documents. Minutes passed in silence, the only sound the soft shuffle of paper. Then she leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. "You're not wrong," Janelle said flatly. "This isn't an accident. He's moving money, a lot of money, and it's not for us." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Christine buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Janelle, though steadier, felt a fire ignite in her chest. She wasn't a woman who cried easily, but betrayal wasn't just emotional here. It was calculated, and then came the horrifying realization: he's been preparing for something. When the women dug deeper, whispers that they had dismissed all these years suddenly made sense. Late-night phone calls Kody would not account for, trips that took longer than needed, excuses that never added up. And then Christine uttered the words that transformed suspicion to horror. "There's another woman, isn't there?" Janelle didn't respond directly. Her silence was enough. They always laughed bitterly at Kody bringing in additional wives. Polygamy was their lifestyle. After all, But this was something else. This wasn't religious. This wasn't about family. This was about lust, greed, and deceit. Kody hadn't just courted another wife openly, as tradition demanded. He had married her in secret. A fifth wife. A shadow bride hidden away from the world, supported by the very money he stole from the family he abandoned, and Meri's breaking point. When Christine and Janelle presented the proof to Meri, she sat silently, gazing at the documents with an empty look. Years had passed since Meri had dwelled on the fringes of the family, frequently ignored, frequently belittled. Her own marriage to Kody had become chillier each year. Yet she remained, tied by obligation, by history, and by a fragile expectation that maybe things would improve. Now, as she followed the lines of the papers with her finger, her mouth shook. After all that, she whispered. After years of devotion, this is what it amounts to. Tears coursed down her face, but her voice began to gain strength. He didn't betray you alone, he betrayed us all. Every sacrifice we made, every humiliation we suffered, every night we cried ourselves to sleep, he demeaned it, and for what? For her? Her words were a spark in dry wood. The fire spread rapidly. In that instant, the three women, who had so long been torn apart by jealousy, rivalry, and hurt, united for a singular reason. They were no longer rival wives competing for crumbs of love. They were survivors, bound together by betrayal, determined to take back their lives. Christine pounded her fist on the table. We can't let him get away with this. Janelle nodded firmly. We have the proof. Financial records don't lie. If he wants to play games, we'll bring them to the court. Meri, wiping her tears, whispered, then let's do it. Let's end this. It was the moment everything changed. The betrayal wasn't just discovered, it was weaponized. The wives weren't just victims anymore. They were warriors preparing for battle, but Kody wasn't oblivious. He knew the walls were closing in. When confronted, he denied everything, his voice rising in anger, his words dripping with indignation. You don't understand, he shouted. This is about building something bigger, something better. I'm doing this for us, for the family. But his wives weren't swallowing it anymore. Christine fired back, her tone fierce. For the family, you sucked us dry. You lied in our faces. You betrayed your children, your wives, your vows. Don't you dare tell me this was for us. Kody's facade broke then. His arrogant eyes flashed with desperation. But it was too late. The truth had come out, and the women weren't going to let him spin it into yet another of his hollow rationalizations. The betrayal that was revealed wasn't only emotional, it was illegal. Armed with attorneys, the wives amassed the evidence: bank records, checks, timelines, even depositions from witnesses who had caught Kody sneaking around with the enigmatic fifth wife. They sued. Fraud, deceit, abuse of marital assets. The charges piled up like stones in a wall that was about to fall on Kody's head. And when the paperwork was handed out, when the news first surfaced, Kody's rage escalated to panic. But it was too late now. The betrayal he'd imagined he could bury had been uncovered, and the wives were willing to use it to bury him instead. The courtroom was now abuzz with speculation of the fifth wife. The media licked its chops over the scandal. The viewers split into factions of denial and outrage. But to Christine, Janelle, and Meri, the commotion didn't matter. They had discovered the truth. They had established their evidence, and they were ready to confront him in one venue he could no longer dominate: the court of law. As Christine gazed at her sisters, she felt something she hadn't in years: strength. Janelle felt vindication, her facts finally breaking through Kody's deceptions. And Meri felt peace. For the first time, she wasn't hanging on to hope, she was hanging on to justice. The deception had been discovered, the secret was out, and Kody Brown's empire was about to shatter. The steps of the courthouse were lined with blinding cameras, microphones pushed forward like guns, and a tide of onlookers whispering, yelling, guessing. It was not merely another case. It was Kody Brown's trial, the formerly proud head of the sister wives' empire, accused of breaking down his carefully constructed world. When the doors opened and the parties arrived, the air in the courtroom grew dense as a storm cloud building strength. Reporters crowded the back rows, scribbling furiously, lenses trained on each face. Viewers of the show hugged their phones, providing real-time tweets. The suspense was palpable. and yet no one could turn away. Kody sat at the defense table, his jaw tight, his hair mussed, his once authoritative stance, now exchanged for restive shuffling. On the other side of the aisle, Christine, Janelle and Meri sat with one another for the first time in years, united, fierce and unyielding. They weren't here as co-wives anymore. They were here as witnesses, survivors and accusers. The prosecutor stood up first, his attire crisp, his demeanor authoritative. He faced the jury, his tone firm, slicing through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are going to hear a tale of betrayal," he started out. "Not of promises or vows, but of trust, of finances, of family itself. The man sitting before you, Kody Brown, presented himself to the world as a man of faith, loyalty and family values. But behind the cameras, behind the smiles, he was embezzling money, lying to his wives, and manipulating those who were closest to him." He stopped, allowing the words to resonate. "This is not about polygamy. This is not about lifestyle. This is about fraud. This is about deceit. This is about a man who felt he was above it all. But today, we established that nobody is above the truth." The courtroom was filled with whispers. Christine's lips were pressed into a thin line. Janelle sat rigidly, her papers at the ready. Meri closed her eyes, for a moment, as if preparing for the storm. Kody's lawyer took his turn, voice growing indignant. "Moreover, my client is a man of faith, a man who has spent his life building a big and complicated family. The charges against him are motivated not by fact, but by resentment, jealousy, and revenge. These women, who were wedded together, now stand wedded in bitterness. This case is not about crime, it is about bitterness." He pointed toward the wives, as if their presence itself was evidence of malice. "We will prove that Mr. Brown's intentions were misconstrued, blown out of proportion, and distorted by those who aimed to ruin him." The wives did not blink. Their silence was a louder protest than anything. The first to testify was Christine. She strode confidently to the stand, her head held high, though her hands did shake a little when she took her oath. She sat down, cast a quick glance at Kody, her eyes flicking away from his burning gaze. He had given her a silent plea, or maybe even a threat. She turned back to the prosecutor. "Christine," he started softly, "how long were you married to Mr. Brown?" "Over 25 years, she replied, her voice steady but tinged with pain. "And during that time, did you trust him with the family's finances?" Christine's eyes glistened. "Completely. I believed him when he said he was taking care of us. I trusted him with everything." Her voice broke as she went on. "But then I discovered the papers, the withdrawals, the hidden accounts, and I understood. He wasn't providing for us. He was providing for another." The prosecutor leaned forward. "What did you understand by making that discovery?" Christine's eyes welled up with tears, but her tone hardened. "It meant that my entire life was a deceit. Each time he said that we were a team, he was already cheating on me. It meant the man I loved was not the person I believed he was." The jury shifted, faces constricting. In the gallery, onlookers wiped away tears. Kody's attorney stood, his voice sneering. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you were unhappy for years, that you frequently felt overlooked? Might it be that your testimony is more driven by passion than reality?" Christine's jaw clenched. "Unhappy, yes. Overlooked, yes. But facts don't lie. These documents don't lie. He betrayed me, and I will no longer remain silent." The courtroom was filled with murmurs, the judge banging his gavel for silence. Then there was Janelle. Unlike Christine, she wasn't there to spill her guts. She was there to bring the figures. She walked up to the stand with cool confidence, her pile of papers cradled under her arm like a shield. "Mrs. Brown," the prosecutor started, "what did you find when going over the family finances?" Janelle readjusted her glasses, her voice sharp and direct. "I found several transfers of more than $75,000 in a half-year span. These weren't approved by any of us. They resulted in accounts we were never made aware of. The funds were diverted to expenditures that bore no relation to our household needs." She set the papers down, each page a nail in Kody's coffin. "I double-checked these records against receipts and statements. They match payments made to subsidize another family, one we were never informed of." The prosecutor nodded. "And in your expert opinion, was it intentional?" "Absolutely," Janelle answered without pause. "This wasn't mismanagement, it was intentional." Kody's attorney tried to spook her. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that you and your husband frequently disagreed about money? That you were left out of decisions? Janelle's eyebrows furrowed. Disagreeing doesn't equal being wrong, and being left out doesn't equal stealing. The jury took furious notes. Janelle descended, her testimony as keen and as icy as a knife. The last wife to take the stand was Meri. She moved slowly, each step weighted, her face ashen but determined. The courtroom was silent when she sat, her hands shaking in her lap. "Meri," the prosecutor spoke softly, "why are you here today?" Her lips shook before speech came. "Because I gave him my entire life, and he discarded it." Tears flowed freely as she went on. "I was the first. I trusted him, trusted us. Even when I was forgotten, even when I felt nothing, I remained. Because I thought that it counted. But all along he was already laying plans to leave us behind." She looked at Kody, her voice growing stronger through the tears. "You didn't just betray us. You betrayed yourself. You ruined everything we had, everything we fought for. And for what? For lies." The courtroom was quiet, the impact of her words weighing heavily. Even Kody looked stunned, his jaw set so tightly it seemed to hurt. His lawyer rose, but his cross-examination faltered. Nothing he said could erase the raw truth in Meri's words. As the wives stepped down, Kody's face turned redder, his breathing heavier. He muttered under his breath, shaking his head violently, scribbling on scraps of paper to his attorney. The calm leader from television was gone, replaced by a man unraveling before the world. The prosecutor seized the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from 3 women who trusted this man with their lives. You've seen the documents. You've heard the betrayal. This isn't just about money. It's about power, manipulation, and control. And it ends here." The gallery erupted again, some gasping, some whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. And yet, the most shocking testimony, the 5th wife, was still to come. But for the moment, the confrontation had struck its blow. The wives had been heard, the facts had been exposed, and Kody Brown's meticulously built dynasty was in shambles, brick by brick, under the weight of reality. The courtroom was already filled with emotion, following the wives' heart-wrenching testimonies. But the atmosphere changed when the prosecutor cleared his throat and uttered words no one anticipated to hear. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls to the stand Mrs. Brown." But it wasn't Christine. It wasn't Janelle. It wasn't Meri. Gasps broke out. The gallery whispered hysterically. Even the judge arched his eyebrows in bewilderment. From the defense table, Kody's face went white. His hands jerked spasmodically. His jaw locked so hard it seemed to hurt. He had an idea what was about to happen. He had a clue who was going to step through those doors. And then the bailiff opened them. A woman emerged, slow and shaking. Her hair surrounded her face in loose waves, her eyes concealed behind dropped lashes. She moved as though every step took strength she no longer possessed. The courtroom stilled, so still it seemed the walls themselves were holding their breath. Christine's eyes opened wide. Janelle tensed. Meri breathed softly. "Oh my God." And in the back seat, Robyn gasped openly, her hand rising to her lips as tears gathered in her eyes. She knew. She knew at once, not a rumor, not a whisper, flesh and blood, standing before them, her face pale with shame, her lips shaking as she avoided everyone's eye. Kody rocked back in his chair, eyes wildly spinning, panic engulfing his face. He leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyer, but the lawyer's face was grim. There was nothing anyone could do now. The truth had entered the courtroom. The woman lifted her hand, took her oath, and sat down. Her voice broke on the first syllable. "Name is," she gulped. "And I am married to Kody Brown." The gallery burst into chaos. Gasps, whispers, even the occasional shout filled the air until the judge pounded his gavel wildly. "Order! Order in the court." Christine's gut wrenched, but rather than anger she felt something else, sympathy. This woman was not a caricature. She was another pawn in Kody's never-ending game. Janelle, stone-faced, scribbled notes furiously, but her mind burned with a single thought. So it's true. He built another life right under our noses. Meri sat frozen, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The betrayal, already unbearable, had reached depths she hadn't thought possible. Robyn, however, shook her head violently, whispering to herself, No, no, he couldn't. But deep down, even she knew the truth. The prosecutor came close. His voice gentle, nearly paternal. Tell us, he said, how did this marriage start? The woman swallowed, her hands writhing in her lap. He said I was special, that God had picked me, that he wanted me to be in his family. But, in secret, he said the others wouldn't get it. He said it had to be just between us. Her voice broke again. He swore to me. Love, security, a future, but all I got was loneliness and fear. He said hide from me. Lie for me. And I did, because I believed him. She sniffled, wiping away her tears. He sent me money. Money that I afterward discovered wasn't his to send. He made me believe that I was starting a life with him, when I was actually a secret. The courtroom fell silent, every gaze on her. The wives leaned forward, their faces ashen, their hearts thumping to each word. The prosecutor nodded gravely. So in short, Mr. Brown took care of you financially? Yes, she whispered. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money he told me came from his job. But it was family money, their money. She looked in the direction of Christine, Janelle, and Meri, shame searing her cheeks. I didn't know, not at first. By the time I did, it was too late. I was trapped. Christine's hands were shaking in her lap. She wanted to yell, to cry, to scream at Kody. But when she glanced at the woman on the stand, she couldn't. She recognized herself. She recognized another victim. Another victim deceived by the same man who had destroyed her world. Janelle ground her jaw. Her anger cold and mastered. She didn't fault the fifth wife. She faulted the man who grinned at the defense table, his eyes flicking like a trapped animal. Meri cracked apart. Sobs rained down her face as she spoke, barely above a whisper. All these years wasted. She clapped her mouth, shoulders convulsing, the pain of betrayal overwhelming. And Robyn? Oh, Robyn. Her universe fell apart in that instant. She had protected Kody, remained loyal to him, fought for him when the others had abandoned him. And now, she finally understood. She had been deceived too. She wept, sobbing hysterically, mascara streaming, body shaking as she held a tissue to her face. Kody could no longer stand it. He leapt to his feet, his voice thundering. Set up, she doesn't know what she's saying. They're manipulating everything. The judge pounded the gavel. Mr. Brown, sit down at once, or I will hold you in contempt. But Kody continued on a rampage. They all hate me, all of them. Christine, Janelle, Meri, they poisoned her. They turned them all against me. I'm the victim here. Me? His voice shook, desperation seeping into every sentence. The jury glared at him, unimpressed. His wives glared at him, appalled. Even his own lawyer hid his face in his hands, aware that the outburst had done away with whatever last shred of credibility there was. Kody collapsed back into his chair, his chest rising and falling, his eyes running wild. The man who had once walked with swagger was gone. In his stead sat a broken man disintegrating before the world. The prosecutor addressed the fifth wife once more, his tone smooth. A last question. Why are you here today? Why did you choose to testify? The woman brushed away tears, her own voice shaking but resolute. Because I can't live a lie anymore. He made me believe I was the only one, that I was his future. But all along, I was just another secret. I don't want to hide anymore. I want the truth out. And I want the women he hurt to finally have justice. The courtroom was silent. All eyes were on Kody, who sat slumped, his face white, his anger exhausted. The wives looked at each other. Agonized, knowing looks. They still didn't have it won. But this moment was triumph. As the judge excused the witness, the fifth wife made her slow way back through the doors. Her head bowed low. She was not applauded. She was not shamed. She was just pitied. Christine whispered quietly. She's just like us. Janelle nodded. Another casualty. Meri was unable to speak, her tears still streaming. And Robyn, quivering, whispered to herself repeatedly. It's over. It's really over. The courtroom hummed, the journalists frantically writing, the cameras recording every detail. The headlines were already writing themselves. Kody Brown's secret fifth wife revealed in court. And in that instant, the trial irrevocably turned. The betrayal wasn't exposed. It was inescapable. The fifth wife's witness was the clincher. Kody's kingdom had been destroyed, not from the outside world, but from within. As the gavel fell to end the day, one reality rang in the heads of all who were there. The sister wives had been deceived. The fifth wife had been silenced for far too long. And Kody Brown, the untouchable man, had finally been revealed. The courtroom had never been so quiet. Weeks of testimony, mountains of evidence, and a parade of heartbreak had all led to the judge's ruling. Every seat in the gallery was occupied, every pen above every notebook, and every eye on the man who would determine Kody Brown's destiny. Christine gripped the edge of her seat so tightly her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Janelle sat with papers still clutched in her lap, as though facts and figures could protect her heart. Meri's eyes were swollen from tears, but her posture was steady, ready to hear the final word. And Robyn sat pale and trembling, the tissue in her hand shredded from hours of nervous wringing. Kody slumped against the defense table, his bright, angry glare drained of passion into empty despair. His hair was limp, his jaw loose, his eyes scanning the room in desperation. For the first time, he wasn't bellowing, wasn't insisting, wasn't bluster. He was waiting, along with everyone else, for judgment. The judge, who was an old man with piercing eyes and a firm hand, put on his glasses and cleared his throat. The noise reverberated in the courtroom like the ringing of a bell. This has been a hard and strange case. The judge started, his tone low but even. At its core, it isn't about lifestyle, or religion, or even family configuration. It is about honesty. It is about trust. And it is about responsibility. He regarded Kody straight. Mr. Brown, you've built a life based on promises. Promises of togetherness. Promises of faith. Promises of support. You led your wives to trust you. They did. And you exploited that trust in the most fundamental ways. The gallery leaned in, each word dropping like a rock into still water. You stole money intended for your family. You lied to the women who stood by your side. You cheated the people who relied on you the most. And in so doing, you didn't just break the law. You broke the very fabric of your family. Kody's lips quivered. He opened his mouth as though to object, but the judge held up a commanding hand. Don't say anything. You've had your say. The courtroom buzzed, hushed gasps escaping from the crowd. Christine's chest rose with a shuddering breath. Janelle sat taller, her eyes fixed on the man who was finally being held accountable. Meri's tears spilled again, but they were different this time. Tears of release, not despair. The judge's voice hardened. For charges of financial fraud, deception, and unlawful conduct, this court finds you guilty. The term crashed into the room like lightning. Journalists wrote frantically. Fans gasped in shock. And Christine hid behind her hands as she wept. The judge went on, unfaltering. You are sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3, as well as full restitution of the money embezzled from your family accounts. Christine fell into tears, not sorrow, but relief. Janelle took a deep breath, holding the papers in her lap, as a soldier puts down arms after combat. Meri silently wept, her hands covering her face. And Robyn, poor loyal Robyn, broke. She wailed through the room, her face buried in her hands, as she whispered, "Why, Kody? Why?" At the defense table, Kody's control unraveled. He shook his head furiously, hands clenched over the tabletop, as if he could grasp life fleeing from him. "No," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "You don't know. I did everything for them, for all of them. I gave my life to this family, and this is what they pay me back with." The bailiffs moved closer, ready to restrain him. The judge's gavel slammed again. Order. But Kody's outburst only worsened. His eyes darted wildly, his words spilling out in desperation. "Christine, Janelle, Meri, you don't know what you've done. You've destroyed everything. Without me, there's nothing left, nothing." His voice rang out, broken and raw. But the wives did not blink. They did not stand up. They did not respond. They merely stood there and watched as the man who once ruled their lives disintegrated totally. As the bailiffs bound Kody's wrists, Christine grasped Janelle's hand. Their fingers merged, their eyes locking through tears. "It's over," Christine said softly. Janelle nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "Finally." Meri inched forward, her voice shaking. We're free now. We don't have to live in his shadow anymore. The three women, who were once competitors, once broken, now sat in a moment of solidarity the world had never witnessed. Their solidarity, forged in betrayal, was greater than the years of fragmentation Kody had imposed on them. And Robyn, still sobbing, at last lifted her head, mascara smeared, her face the color of paste. She whispered through tears, "I believed I knew him. I believed he loved us. But he loved himself more than all else." The other wives remained silent, but their silence was eloquent. The aftermath in the courtroom. As Kody was led away, reporters closed in, voices clashing in a chaos of questions. "Christine, how do you feel?" "Janelle, what's next for the family?" "Meri, do you forgive him?" "Robyn, did you know about the fifth wife?" The wives protected themselves, walking side by side, not answering at that moment. They weren't prepared to provide the world with soundbites. They were still trying to digest what had just transpired. The end of an era, the collapse of a man, and the renewal of their own lives. Within the courtroom, visitors hummed in disbelief. Some shook their heads in grief. Others murmured in glee. The trial of Kody Brown was a public spectacle, but to those closest, it was something far more visceral. Survival. As Kody was escorted through the doors, he looked back one final time. His once fiery eyes now flashed with something darker, fear. His lips quivered, but no sound emerged. He gazed at his wives, maybe hoping for one last look of allegiance, but none were given. Christine averted her gaze. Janelle turned away. Meri didn't look up, and Robyn, still sobbing, didn't get up. The doors slammed shut behind him with a loud thud, and just like that, Kody Brown, the man who had constructed a kingdom of wives and children, who had shared his life with the world, who thought himself above the law, was gone. The wives remained, the burden of years slowly rolling off their shoulders. Christine whispered, "We can finally breathe." Janelle nodded, her fingers firm on Christine's arm. "We can finally live." Meri wiped away her tears, her voice subdued but firm. "And we can heal at last." The three women emerged from the courthouse, for the first time in decades, not as competitors, not as fractured fragments of a polygamous marriage, but as survivors bound by truth. Even Robyn, although grief-stricken, trailed behind them, her sobs muted now, her heart weighed down by understanding that she also had been deceived. Outside, the news screamed in phones and news outlets. Kody Brown sentenced. Sister wives' testimonies. Shatter family patriarch. Fifth wife exposed in court. The scandal that ended it all. Sister wives united at last. Supporters filled social media with shock, outrage, and sadness. Some celebrated the strength of the wives. Some grieved the end of a family they'd watched for decades. But all of them couldn't help but recognize this one fact. The Brown family would never be the same. As the sun set over the courthouse, Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood outside in unison, the breeze wafting away the burden of decades of suffering. Christine whispered, as if to herself, "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." Janelle squeezed her hand. "A new chapter." Meri nodded, a small smile pushing through her tears. "A life without him." And for the first time, the wives of Kody Brown didn't follow behind him. They walked forward, free.